Hello everybody.
Next up we play host to Bristol City in the third round of the good old FA Cup. Kick-off on Sunday is 2 p.m. and there's no official TV coverage to speak of. Goal highlights will appear, as if and when things happen, on the FA's official thing that used to be called Twitter feed. Travel? Well, there's a tube strike on, with travellers being advised to complete their journeys by 5:30 p.m, though the DLR and Elizabeth Line services will be running. The visitors will be pleased with the latter, but please check everything before you leave. So, Bristol City, or, if you will, the Robins then. They're on their third manager of the season. Nigel Pearson opened the batting, and their first 7 games were reasonable enough, with 3 wins, 3 draws, and just the 1 defeat. 12 points gained at that stage saw them tucked in just outside the playoffs in 7th place. However, the following 7 games saw them win 2 and lose 5. The last match of this run saw them go down 2-0 across the bridge at Cardiff, leaving them down in 15th place. This was enough for Pearson to be shown the exit. Curtis Fleming took over for the next 10 days, a spell which encompassed a 1-0 home win over Sheffield Wednesday. At this point, they appointed Liam Manning to the hot seat, Manning having previously spent 4 years in charge of the under-23s at West Ham. They took 4 points from his first 2 games in charge. However, their following 4 saw them lose 3 and draw 1, seeing them back in 15th place once more. The pre- and post-Yuletide period has been kinder to them, however, winning 3 and drawing 1 before their unbeaten run came to an end with a 1-0 home defeat by Millwall at the weekend. Daisy tells me that she's had a bit of a chat with Bristol Hammer of this parish. He tells us that their top-rated player is Jason Knight. The midfielder arrived from Derby during the summer for an undisclosed fee that everyone happens to know is £2 million or thereabouts. The Irishman has been capped on 22 occasions by the Republic. Having been tipped the wink by Bristol Hammer, we had a look at the various forums and they've described Knight as energetic, a workhorse and a box-to-box player. Our Bristol correspondent described the Robins as perhaps being a bit light up top, suggesting that an attacking midfielder might be required over the next month or so. They usually play with one up front, that role normally being given to former Scottish youth international striker Tommy Conway. His international destination of choice stems from a grandparent from north of the border. In fact, the Taunton-born 21-year-old has spent his whole career with the Robins, which must have made his accent interesting for his teammates when he was away on international duty. He's got 6 goals in 19 appearances across all competitions, but all of those goals have come in the league. They do have a number of injuries to take care of. The prize for most unusual ailment of the season looks favourite to be awarded to summer signing Ross McCrory. He arrived from Aberdeen for another undisclosed £2 million. After a couple of pre-season matches, he was diagnosed with a bacterial infection for which surgery was required. He's well on the road to recovery, but he won't be around for Sunday with a whole pre-season being required to get him fit. Winger Mark Sykes, who I really hope people call Eric, picked up a hamstring injury in the defeat at Millwall last weekend. It's described as minor, but it'll be enough to see him miss out this time round. Let's move on, shall we, to the wild and wacky world of association football. Actually, the big sports story of the weekend has not been football, but it's been the World Darts Championship final appearance of 16-year-old Luke Littler. Though there is a football connection in there, with the kid, apparently a Spurs supporter, posing for photos with injured midfielder James Maddison. People were not slow to spot and point out that Littler was 4-2 up in the final before going on to lose to Luke Humphries 7-4. Very Tottenham indeed. Meanwhile, as if to prove that manipulation of referees is not a Klopp monopoly, Arteta at Arsenal has been, rather cleverly it has to be said, gently pointing PGMOL in the right direction by announcing loudly that he hadn't had any contact with PGMOL to point out how badly they thought Saka was getting treated. Arteta slyly pointed out that he was sure the referees knew already. Well, they do now, don't they? In which case, if any of the self-protection cartel at PGMOL are listening, could I point out that Paquetá has been on the receiving end of precisely 1 foul fewer than Saka? Just saying. And so to us, and firstly some transfer news as it's that time of year. So farewell then, Tilo Kehrer, who has signed for Monaco on loan until the end of the season, with an option to buy for a reported €11 million. Now, depending on exchange rates and if and when the deal goes through, that will probably see us make a small loss on the player who made 27 appearances last season, but had only appeared 4 times this term. We wish him well. As with the summer window, we've started to be linked with everyone and his mother. Some of these are interesting and some are downright worrying. This winter's version of Harry Maguire seems to have been Eric Dyer, who, like Maguire at the start of the season, hasn't been getting too much in the way of game time, being adjudged to be too poor even for Tottenham. Thankfully, at time of writing, it seems that Bayern Munich are going to dive in front of us to take that particular bullet. Fingers crossed. Elsewhere, we have the Brighton game, which was a game too far for many. There are a lot of tired legs out there, and boy did we miss Kudus. Or more accurately, boy did Bowen miss Kudus. At the end of the day, it was one of those respect the point days. That's a genuine respect the point rather than the one quoted by Allardyce every time we put in a substandard performance. Let's face it, if we'd been offered 3 wins and a draw out of the last 4, we'd have been quite happy with that. Eyebrows were raised at the non-appearance of Vladimir Coufal. Now, the club had just activated an option to extend the player's current deal by another year, doing so before 31st December and thus preventing the player from talking to overseas clubs from 1st of January. This irked both player and, slightly more vocally, his agent, the latter of whom had at least been hoping for a new deal on improved terms, rather than a simple extension on the same money. The matter was exacerbated by rumours that certain players may be on something like 4 times Coufal's salary, without making nearly the same contribution. So when the Czech's name appeared on neither team sheet nor subs list, the conclusion that the player was considering his options was not a hard one to reach. However, I'm reliably informed that the player made an appearance on something called Instagram to inform the world that he was simply suffering from flu and hoped to be back as soon as possible. Hope that's the case. The absentee list comprises Kudus and Ogerd, both of whom are at the Africa Cup of Soup, and Zuma, Coufal, Paquetá and Antonio, all of whom are looking at the results of fitness tests before being risked. Given that we have a couple of free weeks before returning to league action, based on recent selections, I wouldn't expect too many risks to be taken, though the temptation perhaps to give Antonio a run out for an hour or so might not be resisted if he's actually fit enough. So the prediction then. I've got no idea what sort of team we'll put out. Ideally it would, ignoring the aforementioned 6, be a strong 11, but the manager may think they can afford a few more changes. Not totally so sure. However, even with those twin elephants in the room, comprising the words banana skin, which I'm legally obliged to say in every preview that includes lower league opposition, and West Ham traditional cup vulnerability, I still think we should have enough overall. So the £2.50 that I was going to put towards a pay increase for Coufal will instead go on a wager on a home win. 3-1 to us, please, Mr. Winston. Enjoy the game.